Friends and viewers, good day. The novella written by a Russian author Yevgeny Zamyatin. The name of this novella is We. So, We in this novel unfolds over the course of 40 records. 40 records mean 40 chapters written by the novela's narrator. The narrator or the protagonist is D-503. The action take place in the distant future in the one state, a civilization ruled over by an authoritarian government. D503 work as a mathematician and engineer, and D503 works and is the lead designer of the Integral, a rocket ship the one state will use to travel to alien planet to spread the doctrine of complete subservience to the government and an absolute reliance on logic, mathematics, and rationality to govern public life. D503 writes his record to be read by the conquered alien civilization so that they might have a better understanding of the values and history of their new authoritarian overlords. A godlike cruel dictator known as the benefactor rules over the one state. The benefactor believes that the freedom of individual is secondary to the welfare of state. As such, citizens called sippers lived under the oppressive, hyper-watchful eye of government-appointed police officers called guardian. The one state is cut off from the wild, free world by a massive barrier called the Green Wall. Sippers live in transparent glass houses. The government rips them of their individuality, forcing them to wear identical uniforms, unifs, and harshly condemning all acts of personal expression. Sippers' daily lives are precisely organized around a carefully controlled schedule called the Table of Hours. Even their sex lives are not in their own hand. The state assigns sippers six sex partners, and they must request a pin ticket to engage in scheduled, passionless sex with their state-sanctioned partner. Should sipper break any of the state's strict laws, they are punished by execution via mechanical contraption known as the machine of the benefactor. In his early record, D503 is completely subservient to the one state. He fully subscribed to the government's idea that the collective welfare is more important than individuals' personal freedom, believing that happiness is achieved through a commitment to logic and rationality and the removal of desire. As the plot unfolds, however, he gets more in touch with his human side and his record becomes more expressive, irrational, and confused. One day, while on an assigned walk with O-90, his regular sex partner D503 runs into a female sipper named 1-330, a male sipper S47011 4711 with D503 recognized as a guardian. 1-330 flirts shamelessly with D503, which is against state protocol. D503 is uncomfortable with her advances because he can't figure out what motivates her to act so boldly and rebelliously. He states that she has an irritating X about her personality. Still, he finds himself equally repulsed and attracted to this mysterious female sipper. One day, 1-330 invites D503 to accompany her to an ancient house. Once there, 1-330 leads D503 to an apartment and dons an old-fashioned yellow dress that accentuates her feminine feature. D503 is aroused. 1-330 tries to convince him to stay with her after the personal hour and explaining that she has a doctor friend at the Bureau of Medicine who will write them both phony sick notes to get them out of work. The enthusiasm with which 1-330 dismisses her obligation to one state appalls D503. Though he refuses her offer and vows to report her behavior to the Bureau of Guardians. Despite his supposed hatred for 1-330 and her subversive behavior, D503 finds himself unable to report her to the authorities, claiming that he doesn't have time to do so. Instead of going to the Bureau of Guardian, he goes to the Bureau of Medicine, claiming he is sick. One day, 1-330 files a request for D-503 to meet her in her room for sex. He meets her there and she proceeds to smoke cigarettes and drink alcohol, both of which are against the law. 1-330 slips some alcohol into D503's mouth and he becomes inebriated, impassioned, and suddenly in touch with his animalistic side, which he refers to his other self. In the throes of passion, 1-330 insinuates that she has another lover, which causes D503 to become jealous. He suddenly grabs her with his shaggy paws, his term of unusually hairy animal-like hand, and bites her flesh. The personal hour ends before they can have sex. Eventually, D503 and 1-330 get phony sick notes from 1-330's doctor friend at the Bureau of Medicine. They ditch work and engage in an unsanctioned, passionate sex at the ancient house. Immediately after the encounter, 1-330 disappears mysteriously from the premises. The next evening, D503 has a sex day with 0-90, but he is unable to perform. 0-90 is crushed. D503 acknowledged that although 1-330 is destroying his relationship with O-90 and his poet friend, R-13 is unable to stop loving her. D503 reports to the work at the hangar, and the second builder of the integral informs him that an unnumbed Cyper broke into the hangar while he was out sick yesterday. Guardians escorted the Cyper away and forced him to undergo the operation, a surgical procedure that destroyed the mind's capacity for imagination. D503 is ambivalent toward the procedure, noting that while he knows he is obligated to behave rationally and efficiently for the state, he doesn't necessarily want to submit to the operation to cure his sickness, even if this sickness makes him sleepless, irrational, and miserable. D503 hasn't heard from 1-330 since she disappeared from ancient house, and he becomes lovesick and desperate to see her again. As he searches for her, he realizes he will be late to work, so he goes to the Bureau of Medicine to obtain a sick note. There, D503 is diagnosed with having a soul or imagination, which the state considers a grave condition, as it makes Cyper less machine-like. 1-330 skinny doctor friend instruct D503 to take more walks to cure him of the insomnia, dreaming, and irrational thinking brought on by his soul. Per the doctor's order, D503 takes a walk the next day. As he edges along the green wall towards the ancient house, he spots a hairy, beastly human with yellow eyes on the other side of the wall and wonders whether this barbaric person is happier than he is. D503 arrives at the ancient house in search of 1330. He discovers a secret passageway in the closet of the apartment where they spend time together. D503 passes out when he regains conscious. He is at the end of a corridor. He follows voices and eventually finds 1-330 and the skinny doctor. D503 demands that 1-330 tell him where he is and what's going on. She promises that she will. Shortly after this, O-90 writes D503 a letter telling him she can no longer bear to see him. Since he is in love with 1-30, she vows to remove herself from his sex list. A couple days later, D503 returned to his apartment to find O-90 waiting for him. She pleads with him to give her a baby, something she has always wanted, despite the state's forbiddance. D503 honor her request, even though he knows the state will punish 0-90 severely. Later, during the day of the one vote, the one state election day, dissenter interrupts the normally peaceful electoral process by voting against the benefactor. The one state condemns these rebels in the newspaper the next day, calling them the enemies of happiness. Later that day, D503 goes to the ancient house to meet 1-30. She brings him to the free world behind the green wall, where he sees a massive crowd of hairy, naked people. 1-330 addresses them, announcing the rebels' plan to steal the integral. She introduces D503 as the integral's builder. The crowd cheers for him and feels good to be a special individual. 1-330 hands D503 a drink and his memory becomes fuzzy, though he recalls seeing S4711 among the crowd of naked people, which makes him uneasy. S4711 has been watching D503 closely for some time, which makes D503 paranoid but also grateful that S4711's authoritative presence might prevent him from acting against the one state. In the days after D530's trip to the free world, 1-30 fails him on the structure and organs of Mamfi, the rebel organization which she is involved. Mamfi goals are to overthrow the one state and restore freedom and individuality to its people. 1-330 tells D503 that during Integral's first test flight the day after tomorrow, Mamfi will seize control of the Integral and use to overthrow the one state. D503 agrees to betray the state and join forces with the Mamfi, though he is highly conflicted and anxious about his decision. 24 hours before the Integral test flight, D503 walks outside and runs into the mass of a zombie-like sippers who have undergone the operation. They try to force D503 to join them and receive the operation as well. D503 flees the scene and runs into O-90, now visibly pregnant, who is also hiding from the post-operation sipper, fearing from the safety of her unborn child. O-90 accepts D503 offer to help her escape across the green wall to freedom. On the day of Integral's scheduled test flight, growing acts of civil disobedience caused the one state to push back the mission an extra day. On the day of rescheduled flight, D503 attempts to steal the Integral, but somebody has altered the authorities to Mamfi's plan. The Integral returns to one state intact and protected 1-330 accuses D503 of betraying her. He denies her accusation. D503 eventually realizes that it was you, the woman who monitors the front desk at D503's apartment, who, out of concern for D503 and jealously toward 130, altered the authorities of Memphis' plan. Enraged, D503 attempts to murder her, but he is summoned to the benefactor's chamber before he can do so. The benefactor condemns D503's disloyal action and tells him that 1-330 was only pretending to love him and he had been using him to get to the integral. D503 leaves the benefactor and returns to 1-330. They say goodbye, but their romance has fizzled out and their parting is cold and impersonal. The guardian come to D503's apartment and he submit to the operation. His final record differ vastly from those in the middle portion of We in that it is devoid of emotion, subjective expressionism. He informs the reader that he turned over 330 to the guardian. Although the guardian tortured her, she refuses to betray her cause. We ends with D503 resounding confident in one state. Although enemies of the state still exist, D503 knows that she will serve as it values reasonable above all else, and reason should win. Thank you very much for patient listening.